Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now, there's a bit of a story that starts this one off, so if you do want to skip ahead, get straight to the painting, you can do, but I think you're going to be missing some very important context. So to start off, full disclosure, this didn't go the way I'd planned, but I still wanted to go ahead and put it up, finish off the video and let you see how I'd gone about it because, as I'll explain, I think there's some value in getting it wrong and finishing even when you know something isn't going to be quite what you planned. Every time you're pushing paint around on a miniature, you are still learning something. And even me, I can spot the mistakes I made and where I would correct them next time. So that's a bonus. Now the miniature comes courtesy of the Army Painter. He's actually the free miniature that comes in the Wargamers paint set, and it's enormous. It's 102 paints, and they popped one in the post for me and very kindly said, hey, have some fun with this. By the way, there's a painting competition, and this chap here, he is the subject. Now, I don't think he's going to come out on top, but I did want to have a shot at painting him as he appears on the box art. So I'll make sure that in the description, not just to the Army Painter, but you can also cruise along to Archon Studios, who make this chap, and yeah, pick him up, because he's a really wonderful miniature. And like I said, despite not showing up quite the way I'd planned, I'm happy to have done it, and I do think he's really bleeding cool. So, with that out of the way, all of the paints for this one will be listed in the description, folks, and if you like watching me fix mistakes, my goodness, you're going to enjoy this one. Let's get started. So, we have encountered here what will no doubt be the first issue I have in painting this, which is going to be, he's enormous. This sheer size of him is going to make it quite difficult to keep some of him in shot, so please bear with me, but I'll always make sure that what I'm working on is what's front and center on the camera. Now, I know myself pretty well. If I don't do something which is going to be fast and simple, I'm never going to get him finished because I will putter out halfway and shy away from the project. So I figured, well, he's yellow on the cover, and it is cool. I like yellow dragons. So I started off first of all with a primer spray of Brain Matter Beige, and then I've hit him over the top with, as you might see, Demonic Yellow. Generally speaking, you're going to get a better result out of the lighter colored primers, so reds and yellows, typically those with pigments which don't cover all that terribly well, if you start with a white or an off-white primer first. I chose Brain Matter Beige because it's got just a little bit of warmth to it, which I think is going to help bring out some of the orange quality of that Demonic Yellow, but you could use anything nice and light. Now I sprayed him way too heavily, so unfortunately there are a couple of bits where the detail on him has gone just a little bit soggy, and that's on me. The kit itself is wonderful. I'm the one who has gone overboard here, so bear that in mind when you're doing your own painting, that priming him in a couple of short, light sweeps rather than just, really kicking it on there is going to give you a better result. For once, don't do what I'm doing. So, 4 yellow paints. Demonic Yellow is the primer that we used, and then the Wargamers paint set actually comes with the next 3 yellows up in the yellow triad with 6 paints in it. Anyhow, I get the principle of the flexible triad, and that's what I want to talk about here real quickly, because ordinarily, I'd start with Demonic Yellow, probably shade it with a soft tone or something, then highlight with some warped yellow. But what I'm going to do instead, to keep this quicker, we're going to go straight to Space Dust, and I'm going to dry brush the entire miniature. I might come back later with a little bit of ice yellow, and just pick out some extreme edges with a bit of dry brushing, but we'll see how we get on. Space Dust is what I'm going to turn to now. Now, when you're painting yours at home, you will probably be able to get away by just holding him by the base for most of this. I've got a glove on because I want to try and keep him in shot for you guys. Now, what I've got is the moderate dry brush from the Army Painter Masterclass dry brush set, and I don't normally get this one out because it's so bleeding big, but I've got a bleeding big miniature to paint here, so let's give it a shot. I'm working off some of the paint onto a bit of kitchen towel, and then what I'm going to do is go back and forth over some of those areas of detail. I'm going to need more paint on my brush. Always start in places where you know you're going to come back and paint another color anyway, so as face, you see, there's going to be white bits here later. It doesn't matter too much, if I make a bit of a mess of this. But let's go now, and yeah, as much as possible, trying to go against the areas of detail. So on his wing here, for example, rather than going like this, I'm going to follow the edges where I can. So this bit's probably going to take a while. I do make a joke occasionally about the magic of television, and that's what we're going to turn to here, because sure, quick, but you don't want to watch me do this in real time. So here we go. Dry brushing this whole fella with space dust. As is often the case while you're painting, you may find that your method kind of changes a little bit as you're going. So I discovered that actually not taking off as much from the brush as I thought, and working up most of it on the wing membranes first, then going to other areas on the miniature, it's given me a nice pale wing membrane to work from, and I've got plenty of control for the rest of the miniature. So just something to bear in mind. I am definitely going to swap to a smaller brush to reach some of these areas though. So I'm having fun. Ooh, trying to keep them here. So after a couple of passes with our dry brush, we've got a bit more depth and visual interest on the miniature. What we'll do now is the pale bits on his belly and some of his scales. Now what I'm going to use here, this is ancient stone, and in honesty I would be using my monster brush for this if I could find it. I don't know where I've put that down. So instead, this is the medium shade brush from Citadel. It is about the same size. Now, when you are applying your yellow dry brush, as you see, you go over the areas that are going to be white later quite heavily. It's going to work as a base coat for our white bits. Oops, got a bit of it there. Just rub that off with my finger because, you know, professional like me. So this is nice and calming, just going down his belly. Don't worry if you do run over the yellow just a little. When you come down near his legs, mind which direction you're painting in, because the tip of your brush is going to end up going in all sorts of interesting directions. So take your time here and paint in the white bits. Now see, when it comes to applying this to his hands and his feet, I'm just going to tickle it onto the pads and sort of flick the brush left and right up the sides, and I'm pretty confident that will catch enough of it to look like a fairly natural transition of color between the scales on the back and the padded bits underneath. So I'm not too worried about this being perfect. Just a little bit of white there will do the job perfectly. So as well as all of the little meaty parts, I've also done the inside of his mouth with a quick blast of that. I'm not sure how useful that will be, because I'm probably going to paint that anyhow, but it doesn't hurt to base coat it with something a little bit lighter. What I'll turn to now is deep grey, and now we're going to do his claws. Now I did spend a bit of time looking at the product page, and the little dealy boppers on his frill, his neck, whatever you want to call that, they look like they stay yellow. And frankly, I like that because it gives me fewer claws rather, to paint. And once you've got his nails did, we're actually going to go down to his base and start applying some of the color to that. What I've got is greedy gold and a slightly rough, older synthetic brush here, because as I apply this, I really want to be able to, stab it in there, and I don't want to do that with any of my nicer brushes. So over all of the coins on his base here. Then once that has dried, what we'll swap to is some Tree Ancient. Any brown will do, of course, but I'm going to paint in the wood on the chests here. You could even use different browns if you wanted to. Just slow down when you come near the coins that you've painted, and don't worry about the stuff that's going to be a silver later. Now before we get to the handful of little metal bits that are on the base, what I'm going to do is lay down some scarab green, because personally I like a nice dark base when you've got such a light miniature on top. Now some of these little individual coins I'm probably going to make a mess of. So we are going to come back and tidy up some of this gold. Personally, I can't get over how well that scarab green is covering. So over the exposed bits of the base with pretty much whatever color you want. So now, with a little bit of plate mail metal, what I'm going to do is to paint in, funnily enough, the metal parts on the chests as well. If you've got any coins that you've put a little bit of green over, you will find it easier to drop down some silver first and then put a little bit of gold over the top of that when we tidy up. Now we'll go all the way back up, and this time I'm going to paint in his tongue. I have here Wyvern Fury, and let's see if I can do this without getting it all over his teeth. Now the last base coat that I am going to apply is Aegis Aqua, and I'm going to paint in his eyes with that. I am going to do that off screen though. There's no way I'm going to try and wrangle my brush in here. Okay, moment of truth, not just the back of my hand. What I've mixed up over to the side here is 5 parts of strong tone with 3 parts of speed paint medium. The flow here is what I'm looking for. You could try this 1-to-1, but the shading on the example in the box art is quite dark, so I'm going to try and stick to that. Oh boy, here we go. This is moment of truth. What I'm going to do is, as this goes on, give it a couple of seconds and then shift it towards corners and recesses and what have you. I am actually going to add... Now, thinking quickly, because that's way darker than I had expected, I've just jammed, this is now half and half, the speed paint medium. I'm going to work that into what I've applied there already. Use that to shift it around a bit. And that is flowing a bit better. That's more what I had in mind. So, working relatively quickly, what I'm going to do is go over everything here. The entire miniature with this mix. And gosh, doesn't that look... I might have scuppered myself somewhat here, or I'm a genius waiting to happen. We'll come back. Once this has had plenty of time to dry, I'll pop them up on the windowsill and hope. So, let's go. Now, as I'm applying this and still panicking slightly, you'll see it dripping off his wings, goodness me. It is worth pointing out that the shade... the strong tone shade, once it's gone on, it will naturally sort of flow where it needs to be. So have a little faith once you apply it, put it on, give it a couple of seconds, and then come back to shift it around if you find that you need to. Yeah, keep the faith with this one as it's going on. I was not sold at first, but it's actually coming out, if I'm right, way closer to what I had in mind than I thought. So nobody's immune to those I'm not sure about this jitters. You know, happens to the best and the rest of us. So once it has had plenty of time to dry, you know, I'm not too unhappy with that. There are a couple of things which have not turned out the way that I would have liked. His wings, for example, are a little bit more patchy than I kind of envisioned. But the body itself, I'm really happy with. That's cool. So what I'm going to do to start off with, I want to brighten up his wings a little. Let's spin him around. And I've got here some fresh space dust and just an old makeup brush. This here is fairly similar to the bigger dry brushes. What I'm going to do is just start over the wings a couple of times. And I'm going to lighten those up. Hopefully even out some of that, the shade. I don't think it's going to give me a perfect result, but it is going to look a little bit nicer than what I did end up with. In the future, I think I would be better off to do the wings almost separately and do a different shade over the top of those rather than just trying to strong tone the entire miniature. But lesson learned. Okay, so definitely still not quite what I had in mind. If I had a little bit more time, or I was keen on doing it, what I could come in here with is some fresh, maybe ancient stone, do a couple of layers of that, and then pop a speed paint or something over the top. That would probably look quite good, but I'm going to skip it. I'm just going to carry on with what I've done. What I'm going to carry on with next, though, is some of the ice yellow, which is what I had in mind from earlier to really finish off the yellow parts. So this, I'm going to concentrate on the very edges of some of the lighter yellow details. I might have hit onto something here. What I've done is to really overdo the dry brushing on his wings. So you see I've caught the yellow on the body about as much as I wanted to, but the wings, I've overcooked it, and I'm hoping this next stage is going to help me out. What I've done is mixed up peachy flesh with speed paint medium. So I've done 2 parts medium to 1 part of the peachy flesh contrast. And now, with a bit of luck, what's going to happen, this should work. I can make this a little more interesting around the edges, like the ones on the product side. So let's just wiggle that into there. Now when I've got some of that across the center, I'll just start smudging it around with my fingers to get it to stop running. So not quite what I had in mind, but better than it was. So for the last dry brush over the wings, I'm going to give them a little bit of ancient stone, just to blend together those 2 colors in some spots. So there we go. Not perfect, but improved. What I'll turn to next is a little bit of brain matter beige. And here I would be using my small dry brush if I knew where it was. I've misplaced a lot of my army painter brushes. But this is going to go over all of the white bits. Just a little of this to pick out some of that detail. Now what I've got is a ragged old synthetic brush, one that's nice and stiff but still relatively small, and I have some true brass. What we'll do is carefully flick along the edges of some of the treasure pile, just to make this a little more interesting to look at. I might want some more paint on my brush, to be honest. Then the very last highlight that I'm going to apply, I have here some tourmaline skin. This one I think I bought separately, but very carefully I'm going to get in along the edges of his tongue and just flick there. Once I'm done with this, what I'm going to do is paint the edge of the base in a nice flat black. Then I'll take him outside and hit him with a varnish. I think I'm going to use a satin for him this time. And then let's get a look at what our dry brush dragon looks like once he's all finished. And so there at last our dragon is complete. And like I said from the outset, he didn't really turn out the way that I had in mind. But nonetheless, I am glad to have finished him. What's interesting is that I can spot the places where I made mistakes, and I will bear those in mind next time. For example, with his wings, it would have been better off for me, while applying that shade, to paint a wing at a time, hold them horizontally, and let the shade dry enough to get a little bit tacky, so that it wouldn't flow and drip as much as it did. It's little things like that, where even though he's not perfect, he didn't come out the way that I'd hoped, it's still a learning experience. And even when you've been painting for as long as I have, and I mean, I'm not going to tell you how long because it's a little embarrassing, but you can still be learning, you can still make mistakes. So yeah, if you enjoy watching me correct those, then hopefully this one's been interesting to you. And I think there is still some value in finishing a miniature, even when you know it's not going to be what you'd hope, because this guy is now done. Anytime I want a dragon for D&D or a big encounter in a skirmish game or something, I've got him. He's painted, and he can go on the table, and he'll look cool. He's just not what I wanted. And once I reconcile myself with that, I'm sure I'll feel a lot better about it. But again, thanks go out to the Army Painter for inviting me to take part in the Wargamer Gaming Challenge because, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Like I mentioned, it has been 17 years since I painted a dragon, and now it's been about 7 minutes. So that's really helped bring an end to that drought, let's say. So as well, thank you very much goes to Exit 23 Games for all of the light and sound equipment, and all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, including my gorgeous producers who are showing up on screen now. Thank you so much for your support, folks. I really mean it. You are the ones that are keeping this channel going. Now, any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So, thank you very much for your time, one and all. And I really hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.